Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Top Talk guest webinar with Mark Seymour. Mark, I know I have you in the wings. How you doing, pal?
Really well, Jay. Thank you for asking me back.
Well, popular demand. You've always been a big draw for us. We've been looking at your wedding photography in the past, but one of my favourite things about you is your street photography, and that's why I've invited you back tonight. So you're going to share with us. I know you've been fortunate enough to sort of travel the world doing it, but I guess what I really want to know is just tell our audience a little bit about yourself, Mark, and your photography, because obviously some people will know you best as a wedding photographer. So tell us a little bit about your history, but predominantly your love and your personal passion for the street photography.
Sure. Well, as you sort of said there, I have been a wedding photographer for the best part of 25 years now, so quite long in the tooth. But it's always backed up by documentary photography or trying to tell a story of either a person's life or shooting out on the streets, which really is my main love. So I'm always looking for new people to engage with, new stories to tell, or looking for things going on around the UK and the world that I can go and photograph and tell that story on the street. I'm a little bit different from a lot of street photographers. I actually go and look for something to photograph, rather than just wander up and down the high street or various sort of markets, etc., just looking for random shots. I actually go out and look for events that are taking place and document them and tell a story about what's going on.
That's brilliant, mate. Well, just want to tell everybody now before I hand you over the screen, because we're going to be looking at your street photography. I know you're going to be giving away loads of hints and tips and what to look for when you take the photography. But you do want people to interact with you, Mark. And as I mentioned, you've got your own street workshop coming up in August that you've invited us along to film with you as well. But the best way to interact with you is what we have on the screen at the moment, via your website, Facebook and Twitter.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, connect with me on Facebook. Connect with me on Twitter. Can you see that?
Yep, we've got it all clear as day, mate. You're all good to go.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming along and listening in tonight. It's great to have so many of you on board. So the first question I always get asked is, what is street photography? And it's whatever you want it to be. It's when you're out photographing a non-event. So if you're walking around, if you're going out looking for things to photograph that you're not normally sort of commercially engaged with, you're looking on the streets to photograph people, life, what's going on a sort of daily basis. And there's many different styles of street photography, and my favourite is without doubt sort of the doyen of street photographers, a guy called Cartier-Bresson, who I'm sure everyone has heard of. And this is one of my favourite images that I took a few years ago in Portugal, so sort of almost a homage to Cartier-Bresson. And it's the type of street photography that I try and practice and preach, in that I find an area that I call my studio, with a great pool of light, with it's almost like a studio. And those of you that have got studios will know that you get lots of people come in and out throughout the day, but every now and again you'll get a great couple in or a great subject in, and you can get some amazing photographs, and the rest of the time you're doing a professional job with the rest of the clients. And it's kind of like this here. I've chosen this location, I've seen it the day before, so I've got up nice and early in the morning, and I think this was taken about 5 o'clock, 5:30 in the morning. It was really sort of early. The market had just started, and the sunshine was really, really bright. And I probably waited about 45 minutes for this photograph in this one location, because I needed the right person to enter that space. And typically people walking past, there was a mum with a pram, and there was some young teenagers, and it just didn't quite look right. And eventually the right person came along, and I took 3 shots. This was taken before my relationship with Nikon, and it was taken on a Leica. So I literally just took 3 shots of it. So it was a Leica M9. And the reason I like the shot and it works is the guy's positioned perfectly in the frame. But the other thing that's very sort of that makes it or takes it to another level, I believe, is his feet position. They're both off the ground, so it just creates that beautiful shadow, and there's a lot of interest around that. Moving on, this is the other type of street photography I get, and it always gets a few chuckles, this shot. And this was taken on holiday a couple of years ago, and whenever I go on holiday I always get up in the morning, or I always, sometimes in the early afternoon or late afternoon, I might go and spend an hour or two by myself just looking around for photographs, and I come across this, and this is what I call a grab shot. I saw it happening, I took 2 shots of it, and I got this decisive moment, and it's a great press image. It tells a story, and there's so much going on in the image. If you look for the far left, there's a couple sort of getting it together. There's a little family in front of us, another family with some young lads right in the far right corner, but holding it all together is this guy in the middle, and it's just a lovely sort of beach photograph. And moving on again, this is similar sort of to the last one. I've been to France quite a few times, the home of sort of Cartier-Bresson, and I'm wandering around early morning looking for photographs, and I stumbled across this. It was taken on a Nikon D700, so again a couple of years ago, full frame camera and a 35mm lens, and I just went up. She saw me, and I just kind of acknowledged to her that I was taking a picture. She just ignored me, took 2 frames, and I walked off. We've had quite a lot of success with this picture, actually. It's gone into a gallery, or 2 galleries, and also we sold it to a few coffee shops, and we've had to edit it a little bit out and take out sort of the brand names, but it's actually up in a local coffee shop where I live, with a 6-foot by 4-foot canvas, so it's kind of nice. It gets me a lot of free coffees in that shop. And again, this is going back to the other style that I was talking about slightly earlier, and this was taken in Estonia, in Tallinn, and it was raining. I was looking around for photographs, so I've decided, well, I'm not going to walk out in the rain, get my gear wet. So I've found this archway, and I've just sat up there, and I'm waiting for the right image to come along. And again, I had plenty of time on my hands because I was out there by myself. It was raining, nothing else to do, so I just sat there and waited. And I think I waited about 40 minutes for this photograph because there was cars coming in the background. There was only one person going one way with an umbrella, or there were 3 or 4 people. But this is great because they mirror each other. They're going in opposite directions, and again, it's a lovely shot. I'm really proud of. That is the type of street photography that I like to do. So one of the questions I always get asked for on the Nikon workshops is, what's the best gear for street photography? And I guess the easy answer is whatever camera you've got with you, but try and travel light. I always just say 1 camera, 1 lens, preferably wide angle. And it's the thing I notice on the Nikon courses when we do them. A lot of people come with like 28 to 70 zoom lens, or even longer. And the biggest problem they have is a fear of trying to get close to people. So I'd say start on a 35 or even a 50mm, but try and shoot a prime, because the longer you use that lens, the more you'll get to know it, and the more you'll understand it, and the more you'll try and make pictures with that particular lens, rather than sort of thinking about zooming in and zooming out. We've all got zoom lens built in. It's our feet. We just walk forwards, walk backwards, and we can concentrate on framing the image. So far as cameras go, I use, believe it or not, my Nikon D4S for street photography, and I know a lot of people of the school that you should be small and discreet, but I'm a believer in that it doesn't really matter how big that black box is that you're sticking up in front of your eye. People are going to be aware that you've got a camera unless you sort of hold it down and do discreet photography using, when it's at waist level, which I don't do a lot of that style. But it's really how you act on the day and how you interact with the crowd and how you blend in as to how much you're going to get noticed. And you'll see a lot of my photography is taken with very wide angle lenses, 28, 35 mil, 28 or 35 millimeter primes predominantly. Sometimes I even go for a 20 millimeter if I want to really get in close. And you'll see some of the pictures that I show you a bit later on where we're on a 20 mil lens, and we're literally right up close. And because they're engaging in a particular topic or they're doing something, they're totally unaware of that I'm there or taking the image. And then finally, comfy shoes. Get some nice comfy shoes. I've got a lovely pair of old Dr. Martens that I wear everywhere for this type of photography, because believe me, if you're walking around all day, it does get tiring on your feet.
Nice one, Mark. I'm going to jump in quickly. I had a whole batch of questions, and I knew it would come in when you mentioned about the girl outside the shop in France and the fact that you've used and sold the image. So a lot of people have asked what happens with the permission with street photography, obviously because we're not asking each person you photograph for a release or anything like that. Where do you feel you stand on that, Med?
My belief is if you're out on the street, effectively you can photograph what you like. I don't know if the law is changing, but and I've seen some threads about monuments and buildings and that sort of thing. But I'm pretty sure you can kind of photograph who you like. I've really tried hard to get in touch with that girl. I've gone back to the restaurant. I've offered that coffee shop the images, and they have that image in their shop in France. If I could get hold of it, I'd give her a copy. And I think most people are really flattered if you ask them. I mean, she was aware I was taking the image. It's when I say we've used it, we've been in a gallery, we've got it in a coffee shop. We're not making thousands of pounds from the image. Most of my street photography is done for love, although we obviously charge for doing courses. But we've got it in a book. I don't know, there's so many street photography books out there, and I'm sure every photographer has gone up to every one of those subjects and said, are you okay if I have a model release? It just doesn't happen. If you've got to start asking for that, you're never going to get those spontaneity moments and all those instant moments, decisive moments, which you need for street photography. Don't know if it answers the question, but that's kind of how I feel. It's like, just do it and worry about it later.
I think from personal experiences, we've done some street courses ourselves here, and we very rare that anybody sort of gives you any grief about doing it. We actually had one person ask us not to use an image, and that was the fact that we didn't. So we were asked, and she wasn't actually even in the frame, or she was in the corner of a frame. It wasn't her that we'd photographed. But there's, like you said, there's.
I've got to agree with you. I think I've never been asked to delete an image. I've had people come up to me, or I've looked at them and I've held the camera up and they've gone, they put their hand up and say no. You just respect it. There's no point arguing with it, because you're never going to win that argument. And you know what? There's millions of people out there to go and photograph, and just turn around and take a picture of someone else and just move on, because it's not worth the argument, the hassle, anything at all. You're never going to win the argument, and it's just going to do yourself in and frazzle your own brain, rather than just keeping it fresh to get those great photographs.
So a couple of other quick questions there, Mark, before we crack on. We shooting all of these images handheld, mate?
Yes.
Yeah, and obviously at the moment, with the exception of the image that we have on the screen at the moment, everything we've seen so far has been in black and white, which seems to be quite a common occurrence, doesn't it, with street photography? But there are exceptions, and it is personal taste, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I shoot RAW on the Nikon, so everything is taken in colour. I do love black and white, although there's a colour image on screen now. I had a bit of a dilemma earlier this year, or late last year, and I went to India for a couple of weeks, and most of that was in black and white. A lot of people said, why did you do it in black and white? It should be colour if it's in India. But, it's what I like, and photography is a very subjective thing, and, there's nothing is right or nothing is wrong. It's what you want it to be and how you want it to be. And, if you look at my images, there's a very distinctive style to them. They're normally sort of quite dark. They're very contrasty. There's real deep blacks in there. and they're normally vignetted. There's normally sort of a person in the middle or onto the third that's probably cropped halfway through. And that's my style. That's what I do. And some people will love it, and other people will say, that's not my style. That's not my cup of tea. I don't like it. And it doesn't matter. There's millions of different styles, and that's kind of what makes photography so interesting.
And quickly before I get you to move on, because I know we've got loads to cover, obviously we were just talking there about the context of shooting people on the streets. A lot of the images, as you've already mentioned, Mark, are from a standoff point of view, aren't they? You're not right up close in, it's not you're not going out of your way to make it obvious that you're photographing somebody. But I know you use the DSLR, so sometimes for yourself, it's obviously a little bit easier for the subject to realize that you are photographing them, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say most people have realised they've been photographed. I mean, the Nikon D4S is probably one of the biggest cameras out there, and also it's probably one of the noisiest cameras out there. It certainly doesn't have a quiet mode, and if you rattle off 2 or 3 frames, it makes a sound. I think most people are aware, and just come back on you, Jay. I am in close. I mean, a lot of the times I'm bang up against them. I'm really in close, and that goes for my wedding work as well. I mean, I looked at last week's wedding, and 90% of it was done on the 28 and 35mm lens.
Brill. Thanks, mate. So I've covered the questions we've got so far. You crack on, pal.
Okay. So just a quick one, sort of how it all started for me, and I don't know how many of you have heard of a company called Foundation Workshop or Fearless Photographers, but I went on one of their courses probably about 9 or 10 years ago now, and I was really fortunate. I was given this great, sorry, where have I gone? A great project to cover, and I was covering Allen, which is a district of Dallas, covered their fire station for 2 or 3 days with unrestricted access, and I got some amazing pictures, and it really sort of fired me up, and it really sort of let me sort of decide this is really the direction I want to go with all of my photography in the future. And so I started looking for projects and for people to photograph from that point. One of the first ones, I'll just come on to this in a second, but I just wanted to mention here very briefly, I know Jay's going to bring it on later, but we'd go to far-flung destinations, even far-flung, that was meant to read. So we look for places where there's great street photography. We've got courses coming up in Istanbul and Sicily. We're going to India, which the course is fully sold out now in November. So we're going to places where there's great street photography. So, come back to us if you're interested in that. So just going to talk briefly about some of the projects and images I've covered recently from London, Istanbul, India, along with some of the sort of more personal projects that I've covered and I'm still covering. If we've got time. So this was taken literally about a year ago. It's a place called the Edinburgh Fringe. So going back to this, looking for somewhere to go and photograph, the Fringe is full of unusual people. It's full of families walking out, full of people going to see what's going on, and the artists are engaging with the people on the street. So you can get up really close to these guys, and they're not really interested in you as a photographer. Because they're engaging in what they're doing. So what I'm trying to do here is try to tell a story within a single frame. So you've got this guy here, street entertainer. He's playing, I think, a saw, and you've got a crowd walking past him. If we just took the image to the far right and just cropped off the third, which is what a lot of people would probably do, it's a great picture of the guy, but it doesn't put it in context and tell a story of what he's doing, where he's doing it. And that's what I'm trying to do all the time. So I'm taking that image and then I'm looking for that decisive moment. So when I'm photographing this guy here, I probably would have taken 30, 40 images of what was going on here. So I stay with a moment or stay with a scene until I get that decisive moment. I don't just take one picture, think I've got it, move on. And the decisive moment is what we've got here. He's got the 3 little bowls in front of him. He's got both his arms in the air with his magic stick, and it's the moment. If one hand was anywhere else, it never looked as good. And and then also it looks great in black and white. I use silver effects, by the way, for all my sort of black and white processing still. I also look out still for the detail, and this girl, again, going back to what you were saying earlier about asking people's permission, I took probably 10 or 15 pictures of this girl. She was totally unaware of it, but down one of the other frames there was a little box with her Facebook page on it. So I contacted her and I just said, I've taken this picture of you. Would you like to have a copy of it? And she's gone, wow, it's amazing. I love the joss sticks coming out of my guitar. She goes, that's just so me in my tattoo. She goes, do you mind if I use it all the time for my promotion? I said, no, not a problem. I'm never going to try and sell these. I'm doing it because I love doing it, and we can train people to do it. We can show other people how to do it, but it's very rare that you can go back to this person and sort of say, would you like to buy this? And again, the other thing with street photography, try and vary your shooting angle to create interest. So here I've gone down on the ground, I've seen what they're doing, they've gone through a little repetition, probably every 15-20 minutes, promoting their show. They're not interested in me as a photographer. This isn't a post for me, it's what happened. So I've looked at it, I've decided how I can frame it best, and I've got real close to them. I mean, this was done on a 28mm lens, and you can see how close I am by how close their hands are, or how big their hands are in the frame. But it creates interest because of the angle. Again, another one, shoot low angle. And also I try to put these elements of where it is. And this, although we know it's in Edinburgh because it's got Edinburgh down on the right hand bottom, we could have edited that out. And this could have been from any part of in history even. They're doing a play, again, they're in the moment themselves. They're promoting something, so they're not interested in you as a photographer. This was taken on a 20mm lens, so I was right down close. I was nearly virtually touching this guy, but I wanted to place him so he was against the sky, so he stood out. Wanted the building in the background, so it placed in a particular place, and so it's telling a story within a single frame. So Istanbul, excuse me, I want you to take a little slurp of drink. So a place where we're going to next year with a Nikon workshop. It's a great place for street photography. It's kind of made for it with all the markets, with the mosques. And again, they're very friendly people, so they don't mind having their photograph taken as long as you respect their culture. And I decided I wanted to photograph not only the streets but in the mosques, and it never ceases to surprise me how sort of friendly people are, and if they see you're doing it and you'll go about it in a professional, friendly manner, how welcoming they are to you photographing them. I saw this boy washing his feet. He's just about to go into prayer. He saw me. I just nodded to him, and he carried on. So he was fully aware I was taking his picture. Again, done on a 35mm lens. Lovely light, because the light's coming through from the right with the pillars, and it's bouncing back off that wall onto his face. It's just a lovely little picture of what this boy does probably every morning. So again, you'll see images like this in Istanbul if you walk around, and this is a street seller. He was well aware. I was on my knees in front of him as he was walking, and he just walked past me, and we took 4 or 5 frames of it. And it's a lovely image just because of all that stuff he's got in his track, or his tractor, or whatever, or his truck. But the big successes that I had were actually in the mosques, and I went in it 3 times every morning, and I used to go in there at 5 o'clock in the morning for the first prayer session, because I knew it was, if you like, the old religious people in there, and that was when I thought I would get the best shots of the most interesting people. And on the 3rd morning, the imam, he just waved me over and said, "Can I talk to you?" And I thought, oh my God, here we go. I'm in trouble here. And he said, "Can I talk to you afterwards?" And I tried to avoid him, but he managed to sort of find me, and he said, what are you doing this for? And I said, just because we love photography and we're just trying to tell a story, and we're not going to sell these. It's just for our own use, and we just love taking photographs. And he said, okay. He says, can I see something? He said, would you like to come back to our house for breakfast? So two of us went back to the imam, who is the priest in the mosque, to his house, and we spent the whole morning there talking in pidgin English about politics and religion, just through being discreet and being professional, not sort of taking hundreds of pictures, just taking one, moving off. And again, this was done on a Nikon D4S in here, so I was just one picture and I moved off. But it just shows you can get great photographs in very quiet places if you're professional and if you go about it in the right manner. This one was taken. There was another guy come out with us, and he was another wedding photographer I know very well. But it's the first time he was doing any street photography, and he said, "Can you sort of give me some tips or show me how to do things?" And I said, "Well, let's just go." We just walked around random places. I said, "Well, let's just go in that cafe and do some pictures." And he said, "Well, what do we do?" And I said, "Well, let's just go in there and just start taking." And we did it. We just walked in all these different places and these shops and bazaars or whatever. And this was a cafe, and these guys are playing cards, and we just walked in there and probably stayed there 10 minutes, had a coffee, and they totally ignored us taking images. But I love it because you've got these guys here who are, they're obviously locals, and you've got the lovely picture of the Caribbean on the left-hand side, which is so far away from their world. And it just makes for a great and interesting image. And then back to the street, there's loads of things like this going on in Istanbul, and people don't mind you photographing them, they just let you get on with it. And it's honestly, it's one of the best places, I'd say, apart from India, to go and photograph on the street. We just take a little slurp. So one of the other places I went to last year, it was Sicily in Easter, and it's a place called Trapani. It's a very famous place. It's very mafiosa, and every Easter they have this the ceremony goes on there. It's called the Misteri di Trapani, and I decided I wanted to go and photograph it. And I was really fortunate because the D4S was just being launched at that point, so we took over a D4S. It was all taped up and done a lot of practice shots or test shots on it. And this whole series of pictures was taken again on predominantly a 28mm lens, although we used a sort of a 35, and there's some portraits I did on a 50mm. But I just had a little tiny bum bag around me, one camera, a couple of lenses, but say most of it was done on the 28mm. Even this close up, this was done on 28mm. You can just see, I mean, this is inside a church. They're totally engaged in what they're doing. So this is going back to about finding somewhere where there's maybe a ceremony going on. It could be a carnival. It could be a street party. Anything where people are engaged and doing things, where you can go there and record the event or tell a story about what's going on over a 1 or 2 day period. This event at Easter takes place over a 2 day period, and we pretty much stayed up. I went there with my son, and we pretty much stayed up 24 hours photographing. But it was one of the best experiences I've had for a long time, and we decided to do a workshop there next year with Nikon. Again, nice close-up detail. It's done on a 28mm lens, this was, so you can imagine how close I was to her. She was totally aware I was taking the photograph, but she's in that moment and she's just focused on what she's doing, so she doesn't really care, or she's not going to say anything to me taking the photograph. This is one of the most, this has been published heavily, this image by Nikon, and was in the Telegraph as well about this festival. It wasn't my favourite image from the set, but you can just see the guys are very mafiosa. Again, this is how close, you can see how close I was just by how close that guy's hand is in the bottom right hand corner, but they're totally unaware. They're focused on again on what they're doing. Different angles. I'm slightly lower here, so I've crouched down, so I'm not engaging with them on an eye-to-eye basis. This was my favourite picture from the event, just because the whole Sicily event is about pain. It's about reenacting what Jesus went through at that Easter period when he was resurrected. And these guys carry around these floats. There's 40 of them carrying around each float for 24 hours. And believe me, they are heavy. We tried to budge one and we put our shoulder and couldn't even budge it at all. But don't be afraid to get in close. That guy is going through a lot of pain, and I wanted to show that. And I was probably less than 2 foot, 3 foot away from him. And again, there's emotion going on at these places, whether you go to carnivals or events or, speakers corner. People get emotional when they're passionate about things, the same as, I'm passionate about photography. But so these guys are passionate about what they're doing here. So look for that emotion and put it in the frame and capture it. And it's part of the whole story. So altogether, these images make up a lovely set that tell you a story about what's going on at this particular time in Sicily. Do you want to ask some questions, Jay, before we go on to the next?
I was just about to jump in, because otherwise I think we're getting them through thick and fast now, so we might lose a bit of track. So a couple of key ones. I've been asked a couple of times now, because you've been talking about lens choice and cameras. A couple of people have asked if you could recommend a lens for a crop sensor camera that will give them the best results.
I mean, I'd say unless you're really brave, start with a 50mm lens. So go for a 35mm on a crop sensor, I'd say. If you're brave, I would go for a 28mm on a crop sensor that'll go to 35. It's quite interesting when we've done the Nikon courses around Shoreditch and Speaker's Corner. By the end of the day, those people that come along with Nikon lenses, and you don't have to be a Nikon student to go on a Nikon course, by the way, they're all saying, can I borrow the 28mm or can I borrow the 20mm lens? After 3 or 4 hours of shooting, they've broken through that barrier, and they're now, wow, I can do this. I didn't realise you would get so close. So if you're going out by yourself, start off with a 50mm equivalent or a 35mm equivalent. So I guess it's a 28 or 35.
Brill. Okay. This is quite a nice question, and I'm sure you'd have the right answer for it. Can you get these kind of shots in any city, or are some cities just a waste of time?
It's a great question, and there are some cities that I think are really, really difficult to photograph in. And one that springs up to mind is Marrakesh. And everyone looks at it and says, wow, this must be amazing around that market. There's so many people there. But believe me, you go and try to take photographs in Marrakesh and everyone objects to it. Everyone puts their hand up. Everyone looks away. The minute you start walking around with a professional camera, really, really difficult. Whereas, the opposite, if you look at Istanbul, no problem at all. India, people love it. They almost come up to you, and you've got to work at ways of getting away from them so that you can get great photographs. So there are places that are good. There are places that are not so good. But I would look for things happening, so people are engaged in what they're doing. So they're not really taking any notice of you with that camera.
And I suppose that applies to closer to home here in the UK. Look for events, isn't it? Even if it's a festival, or there's most cities. I know Cardiff we've got a food festival on down the bay at the moment. Obviously, so any of these sort of things, just look out for what's coming up, and that's where you hone your skills, really, isn't it?
Especially this time of year, you've got the big Pride festivals. You've got loads of food festivals. These places are rammed with people doing things or engaging with things, and even if you go up to these food festivals, I did one last year, and you start talking to the people that are making the food and just say, oh, can I do some pictures? I'll share them with you. That, as long as you're discreet and don't get in the way, they don't have a problem with it. They're quite pleased that you've asked them, because that proud of what they're doing.
Somebody mentioned, I think it's a good point, is it just that there's that element of getting over the fear of invading somebody's space, and that's how they felt that they haven't got close enough in the past. So that just in your head, Mark, is that something you just have to get over?
It is. I think you need to work towards it. I think if you've never done it before and you suddenly go and buy it, if I gave you a 20mm lens, you'd just freak out almost. I mean, it happened to me on that foundation workshop, and I was really fortunate that I had two mentors that were Pulitzer Prize winners, and one of them was called Deanne Fitzmaurice, and she said to me, Mark, she goes, what lenses do you use? And I said 28 and 50. She says, that's all you use, isn't it? And I says, yeah. She goes, you're too comfortable with them. She goes, I could just see you know those lenses inside out. She goes, but you don't use anything else, do you? And I said, no, because I'm comfortable with them. And she said, what else have you got in your bag? And I says, 20mm, 105. She goes, right. She goes, give me your lenses. That's all you're using today, the 20mm and 105. And I had to go back that night with a story about this fire engine. So I was forced to use the pictures. And, I couldn't use the 105 a lot of times because I went into the police stations, I was in hospitals, I was in ambulances or people's homes. You couldn't use 105 to tell a story. So I was forced to use that 20mm. And God, did I get close. But at the end of it, I learned a lot. And now it doesn't bother me. And I think even at weddings, if you walk in a wedding in a bride's bedroom and you go in there with a 28 or 35mm lens, you've kind of set the scene straight away. And I'm probably no more than 6'5" or 6 foot for a bride most of the day, but most of them say at the end of it, we never noticed you. So it's just a fear thing. It's getting over it. And I think the best thing to do is try and go out with a buddy. If you can come on one of the Nikon courses, they're really cheap, to be honest with you, like 70 or 80 quid for a whole day. Come on one, because you will go away with, renewed inspiration. It's not a case of, I can go to speakers corner myself and do that. You're getting all those extra things, and you will go away with, you'll go away with lots of information. Also, you'll go away with a lot of confidence.
Brilliant, mate. I'm quite aware of the time, and I know we've got quite a bit to get through, so I've got some more generic questions, but I'll hang on to them for now. But if you want to crack on, pal.
So this is quite interesting because this is looking for people's stories to tell, and I'm always at weddings, or if I see people who have got an interest or are interesting, I get talking to them, and if they have a story to tell, I just say, can I come and spend some time with you? And literally about 6 weeks ago, I'd photographed a wedding, and I'd never met the couple before the day, and I found out that he was an amateur boxer, and I said, can I come and take some pictures of you? And he says, yeah. He says, anytime you like. And I said, well, I want to spend a couple of days with you, or a whole day. And he says, well, what for? And I said, well, tell the story. I says, I want to be there when you train, and I also want to be there when you're in the changing room doing your gloves on. And I said, I want to be there when you fight and when you win. And he says, oh, wow. So you can tell this guy's story. And this is quite interesting here. This is a little baby. I photographed, this is the bris, which is in Jewish terms, it's a circumcision. Don't worry, I'm not going to show anything on the screen. This little baby after it's all happened. This is the mum, Golda, a very Orthodox Jewish lady. I photographed her wedding 2 years prior to this, and she phoned me up and she said, "We just had a baby, just had a baby boy. Will you come and photograph the bris?" And yeah. I went there, and it's almost as big as a wedding. There was like over 80 people at this ceremony at 7 o'clock in the morning. And the mum passes the baby to a friend, and the friend passes it to a male, and then the male passes the baby to the rabbi, and then the rabbi does the deed. That's all the stuff, and it's not in a hospital. This is in the synagogue. But you see, we're telling a story here, and we're telling a story now of this girl getting married, the first baby, you can see the little scream on the baby's face there, and this is Dad, and the rabbi. So I've done Golden and Shruli's wedding. Their baby Ephraim is the bris. And then next month, I'm doing the boy's first haircut, because the Jewish boy never has his haircut for his first 3 years. And again, it's another party, another celebration. There'll be 80 to 100 people there. So it's a project, and I'll obviously have to wait another 10 years before I do his bar mitzvah, but I'm getting to tell a lovely story of this family's life. And there's a very Orthodox Jewish family, and how many people can do that? I feel very privileged to do it, but there's other people out there that may be close to the Greek community, or born again Christians, and there's all these different stories around, and it's interesting to go and talk to these people and spend time with them to try and tell their story. And there's Mum afterwards. She had as a little portrait on her wall, and she's still got it there, and it's a lovely portrait of Mum and baby. So I just wanted to talk about India, because I went to India in November last year, and I went with the Hope Foundation, which is a foundation or charity for children, to take children who are being abused or being groomed, or to go onto the street or into prostitution or slave labour. It's only in Kolkata the Hope Foundation operate. But I went over there with them to photograph life effectively. And this year they've asked me back to run a training course there. And we're taking 8 photographers over there. And part of the deal is, whatever you pay me, 50% of it has to go to the Hope Foundation as a charitable gift. So it's great that you're giving, but it gives you the opportunity to get great photographs and go to the slums and go get those photographs that you see the likes of Steve McCurry taking, with no visible threat. It's very friendly, it's very easy, it's, if you like, facilitated by the Hope Foundation. And here's some of the images that I took. I mean, I wanted to show these images because, again, with street photography, this is something that I try and do quite a lot. It's something we call layering. So you've got 3 layers here. So you've got the layer at the bottom, which is, if you like, the kids. You've got the second layer with the teenagers, and the third layer is the house, or which actually there's their school. So it's telling a really interesting story rather than just a picture of a kid playing a game. And then there's things like this going on, all around India, and it's just keeping your eyes open for them. There's these vivid colours around, and this guy come out, he's cleaning his teeth. This was his front door, and I just took this picture, framed it, but I wanted all this red in it because it was really sort of vivid, and it's something I wanted to show off in this image. And again, this was one of my other favourite images from my Kolkata trip. I was started photographing this woman, and she just stood there and started let me photograph her. And I moved around, and as I moved around, I noticed this guy sitting there reading a newspaper, and it's almost like they were from 2 different worlds. Because round the corner through the door, it was a doctor's surgery. So, but again, I went in the room and I spent 5 minutes in there photographing him. I couldn't talk the language, but I just nodded to him, and he was absolutely cool with it. He let me photograph him. I nodded and thanked him afterwards and walked away, and he was really happy with it. But if he'd said no, I would have just walked away and done something else. Again, a lovely street image. These sort of things happen in India. You see these bikes around, you see these people dressed like this, you see these wonderful colours on these walls, and they're just a joy to photograph as a street photographer. And if it's something you're interested in, let me know, because Hope will want to do this sort of course again, so we can raise a bit more money for them as well. So this is I was talking about layering here, and I just made a few notes around it to show exactly what I mean here. And we've got 3 layers here. So we've got layer 1, which is the edge of the frame, which is the Indian guy on the left. You can just see the back of his head. He holds the image together, and he draws you into the next layer, which is the 2 guys are kind of doing something, just minding their own business, which is layer 2. Then you've got layer 3, which is the main subject, that is kind of looking at me and is aware I'm taking his photograph. This image, out of interest, was taken about, I don't know, 6,000, 8,000 ISO, because it was incredibly dark in there. And again, I know a lot of people use these small compact cameras. I know that, you know, like Sony are bringing out some amazing cameras at the moment that can do uber high ISO, but that's one of the advantages I think I have when I'm shooting, you know, twilight with the Nikon D4S, is I can get great quality images. I can get, you know, nice smooth images at silly ISOs. The whole image is held together again by all the clothes, but I created that by getting down low and, you know, giving an interesting angle on that image. And again, it's try, when you're doing street photography or any type of photography, you know, wedding photography as well, if you do this documentary style, which I engage with, is try to use different viewpoints. You can see I'm slightly dyslexic, you know, I've got viewpoints there. Try and use different view angles, but, you know, the reason this image is strong is because of his eyes, and, you know, there's that white of his eyes you can see. And again, you know, a lot of my portraits or images, that's a focus point because it draws you into the image, and makes a strong image. But he's put in the frame, and there's stuff around him that places him where he is, and he's at the flower market. That bag's just full of, if you like, sort of loose flowers. That's obviously going to a rich Indian's home. Again, here, you know, I think I was the only. There was 8 of us on this. Went out with Hope, and everyone else was taking pictures of the kids, and they got some lovely images of kids. And, you know, when I showed this to the foundation, they said, "This is the only image we've got that actually says really what this is about. That how close the trains come by with these kids just playing." And, you know, then you look at the trains. You know, out the window has gone health and safety. Those doors are open all the time as it goes along and into the station. But those kids are playing there, and they're happy as Larry. You know, they're living in the slums, but, you know, it's a lovely community in there, and they're very friendly. But it's putting different elements in that same image to tell a complete story. And this is a great image. Normally, when I put a lot of these images together, there's another one that follows this, because these guys were just playing cards on this track, and they were there playing, I don't know, whatever, they're playing poker or whatever. And next minute you hear a rumble on the track and there's a train coming. So they just put a couple of rocks on the cards, jump off, the train goes over, and then they get back and carry on the game of cards. And it's just so bizarre, but to them it's the most natural thing in the world. That's what they do. And then finally, this is the last bit of pictures. So we might run over about 5 minutes, Jay, but the next course we've got coming up is Speaker's Corner. It's on the 23rd of August. These courses have to be on a Sunday because, hey, that's when Speaker's Corners is. You can book it via the Nikon Training School, or just give me a call and I'll walk you through exactly what we do, and, you know, what you can expect, or what you need to bring with you, and all that sort of thing. But these are typical of the sort of images that we get here. You know, images where you've got predominantly, you know, in the past it was all about political views, and it tends to be more about religion now, with born-again Christians, Muslims, Sikhs, Jewish people. They're all down there, you know, telling the virtues of their own religion. So there's lots of, if you like, sort of conflict there, but there's never angry conflict, or there's never sort of you know, violence down there. It's all verbal, you know, sort of sparring, so to speak. But you just get great images. And, you know, this one here, you know, I was down low. This was done on a 20mm lens. So, you know, I was virtually up against that guy, but I wanted to get as much of the framing as I could. I wanted all the trees around. The only thing I wish, he had a gun in his hand, because it would kind of really make it then, but he's got a trumpet in his hand. So, but then it is in this country, not America. Again, this was done on a 28mm lens, and you can see how close I am to it, but he's totally unaware of where I am, because he's so engaged in what he's telling you, or he wants to preach to you. And you've got the crowd there, it's backlit, and you need to get low so that I can get that sort of framing, otherwise you kind of lose his head in the sky. But, you know, this is one of the things we try and cover a lot is how to conquer your fear of getting in close. And it's amazing at the end of the day. The last one we had, we had people sort of almost fighting over who could use the 20mm lens, and yet none of them come with anything remotely like that to start with. Then the other thing, I think this is the final frame or one more, is stay with the scene. Shoot it from different angles, just to ensure you get the decisive moment. Don't just take one picture of it and walk off. I'd probably stay with something like this 15 or 20 minutes, and I might take 30 or 40 images. But it doesn't matter. Digital's free. We can take as much as we like, and then we can edit hard, so we've got that lovely moment. And the moment's here because you've got the guy on the right putting his hand up, and you've got the guy in the crowd putting his hand up. So there's that, they're just catering to each other. That's why it makes it. If there was no hands, it wouldn't be a great image. But because it takes it to a different level. And again, here it's about the hands, and you'll find lots of this sort of thing. And again, I think this was done on a 28mm lens. You can see how close I am because the guy on the left, where his ear is, and the camera's probably virtually touching him, but he's being used as part of the frame. Again, nice and close. He's talking to someone else, but he's totally engaged what he's doing. Getting close, you try and conquer those fears. There's your question time, Jay.
Okay, well, there's a few of them, mate, but thank you so much. Already loads of fantastic feedback.
Far away. We can just roll through them all if you want.
Okay, mate. I know the answer to this, but I don't know the answer to this in regards to your street photography. Do you ever use film?
There's a yes and a no. I'm playing around with it. I was a film photographer, and I hanker back to it now and again, and then I realise how stupid I am because I just don't have the flexibility that I do with digital. But I keep wanting to go back to it because you can see a difference between film and digital without a doubt. If you print a great film image on burrata paper, believe me, it goes into a different level. But it's so expensive. I went on a recent course, photo training overseas, and I only took a film camera and I only took a 50mm lens. So I forced myself to do it, and I only took 3 rolls of film. Those 3 rolls of film cost me, to get them all printed to 6x4, I had 4 or 5 10-8s done, was about 110 quid. So it's expensive. Digital, that would have all been free. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of how.
Well, that answers the question from your point of view, but yeah, I get it completely. A couple of people have asked if we can just touch on it again. A few people missed the beginning. So you shoot in RAW, because a couple of questions come through. Are you shooting, are you setting your camera to black and white? I know you'd already answered that. And that you favour silver effects. And some people just asked what silver effects was. So if you can obviously just tell them your process and how you're doing that, mate.
Yeah, just really quickly. Yeah, I always shoot RAW. I don't get why people would shoot anything else but RAW. You're giving too much away if you shoot JPEGs, and at some point you won't get the image right, and RAW will let you put it back. Have as much image as you want. You can throw it away afterwards, but you can't go back and get it. So far as processing, yes, I use Silver Effects. Silver Effects was I'm trying to think of the name. It was originally by a company called NIK Software. NIK Software was bought by Google.
Oh, that's right. I remember that.
So you can still buy it. And in fact, it used to be a horrendously expensive program. It's something like 150, 200 quid per module. So the black and white module, a color module, an effects module. And Google bought it, and they just said it's 150 quid for all the modules. But I still think it's the best black and white conversion software. There's just so many control points in there. It's got some great plugins that you can just press and go and get quite near. But if you want to go in there and do something pretty special, you can get pretty damn near film with Silver Effects. I've not tried the other programs. I've been asked to look at some DxO software. it's something I might look at, but at the moment I'm doing all my sort of, if you like, art stuff, my street stuff, and when I want to print stuff out, I do it in Silver FX.
Excellent, mate. We touched on this, but I don't think we never asked the question directly. So the question is, can you make money from street photography, or is it primarily really for the passion and the love of it?
I think, well, you can make money from it because I guess people like Steve McCurry and whatever do, and yes, you can make money of it because I guess we're doing courses in London, Istanbul, Sicily, India. So yes, you can make money of it. To try and sell it as individual prints is very, very difficult. You've got to have something very different, unique, something that's going to people go, wow, that they can't get elsewhere. And there's so much street photography out there. I would say, do it as your passion. It's a way of getting back what we all love doing, is because we're all photographers. And I've been doing weddings a long, long time, and I'm quite long in the tooth with weddings. And this is a way of me engaging or getting better at my wedding photography. It lets me practice my wedding photography.
Brill, I just dropped the screen back so people could see about the London workshop as well while we just go through the questions, Mark. So I think you have plenty of slides, but so they can...
Yeah, keep going. I'm fine for another 10 or 15 minutes if you want.
We're getting there, so we're going to crack on if that's okay with you. So thanks, guys, for staying with us, and some great questions here. So this was a good one. I like this one because we've talked about working abroad. Do you have any tips about packing your kit for abroad? Do you take it all on the plane with you, or do you prepare? Does any of it go in the checked-in luggage? And if so, how are you protecting it?
Great question. I've done both. I don't take it all. I try and cut down what I'm doing. So I will take just one body and 2 or 3 lenses. I have put it in the main hold. If I put it in the main hold, I wrap it in 2 or 3 towels, a camera body or a lens. So I'll wrap it in some socks, then put those socks inside the shoe, and then put the shoe inside a towel. So it's almost like in as much packaging, it's probably delivered to you. So it should be okay. Those of you who've got smaller mirrorless cameras, it's probably not a problem. You can kind of stick it in your pocket. Or the other thing, if you're over your baggage allowance, just take your camera out and stick it over your shoulder because it's not classed or not counted then at all.
Well, that's interesting. You mentioned about the mirrorless. Obviously, you've talked about that you're still using, obviously, the DSLRs. Are there any mirrorless that you found that you favoured, or anything that's interested you? And do you think that's something that's coming more into the street photography, if you like?
Yeah, it's a difficult one for me to answer, Jay, because as a Nikon man, and I have a relationship with Nikon as an ambassador. I have a contract that asks me to only use Nikon equipment. I didn't
think about that. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Sorry, mate.
No, it's no problem at all. But if I wasn't a Nikon man, I can, I would be using probably now. I'd probably go and get one of the Sony cameras now. I think the Alpha 7R or something like that that's coming out in a week or two looks a phenomenal camera. At this moment, Nikon don't have any plans to bring out a mirrorless camera to compete with the likes of Sony, Fuji, etc. And I think Canon are in that same boat as well.
I think you're right.
Who knows?
Yeah.
They might bring something out next week. We're not privy to that. It's it's all done under NDA, and when it's released, it will be told.
We've been asked this a couple of times, and I've answered it to the people who've asked it, but we get it across now, especially now we're talking about the London workshop. You don't have to be a Nikon user to attend your workshops, do you, Mark?
No, absolutely not. If you want to attend any of them, absolutely, you don't need to be a Nikon user. The only thing I'd say to you is, I do bring along Nikon equipment, and I bring along, some normally other bodies along, so I might bring some D750s if people want to try them. I might bring some other sort of more esoteric lenses. So if you are a Nikon user, you can take advantage of those. If you're not, sorry, you can't. Well, you can. We could loan you a D750 or something, but it doesn't exclude you from the course at all. The course is for photographers, and if you want to pick up some Nikon gear, great. But it's being run by Mark Seymour. under the Nikon brand, not that you have to use the Nikon gear.
Brilliant. Again, another question now, pal, that we've asked a few times, and so I've got to get it out there. The images that we've seen tonight, have they all been natural light? Do you use any flash at all in your photography?
In my street photography, there's no flash at all. It's all available light. So one of the things, photography is about light, and you can't just go snapping around anywhere. The same with weddings. There's lots of bad documentary photography, and there's lots of great documentary photography, but you still got to be aware of where the light is coming from, and if you can use that light to your advantage, you're going to get, your shots are going to be so much better. I mean, black and white works in really contrasty situations, so midday sun and stuff like that is not so much of a problem for black and white, because it doesn't matter if you've got dark shadows and bright highlights. It works with black and white. It doesn't look so good in colour.
Brill, I don't know again if you can answer this. Somebody's going to Hong Kong. Do you think this will be a good place to photograph? I'm sure it will be.
I'm absolutely positive it will be. I think there's more cameras sold in Hong Kong than anywhere else, isn't there? Hong Kong, China, those four places.
I know that it is a place that is at the top of my desired wish list, so I can only hope that the photography,
sure it is,
that the photography, I'm sure, will be incredible. Yeah. Okay, so again, I think a few of these that we're just creeping up. Maybe a few people.
Fire them away, James. No problem.
Cool. How spontaneous would you say that you are then, or do you have do you kind of have an idea of what you're going for at the beginning of the day? I know at the beginning of the presentation you talked about setting up the shots. You've seen shots over a couple of days. So is it a 50-50 thing, or is a lot of it mostly the spontaneous?
Most of it's. I mean, I would say the type of photography, the real street photography, where I go out and look for an area that I call my studio and wait there for the right person to come in it. I probably engage in that style of photography less than going to look for a project. My favourite style of photography really is to go and tell a story or a photo essay and stay with it the whole day. So I kind of know what's going on. I kind of, I am going with the flow a little bit, because things can crop up, and you don't really know what's going to be with that trapini in Sicily. I never really knew what was going on, but you just stay with the moments, and you stay with the crowd, and you kind of get a sense of where the action's happening, and you stay with that. It's a bit like a wedding, you need to be near the bride most of the time, because that's where most of the action is going to be happening.
So following on the same question, because this came in, so you might have just answered it, but with the decisive moment shots that we talked about earlier in the presentation, would you say that that's the most difficult discipline in photography to get a high success rate from? Yeah,
of course it is. Yeah, I mean, you won't get a high success rate, and I think if you go out and just do pure street photography, so I know there are courses, in London or Newcastle, where a photographer will take you out in the streets and you'll wander around as a little group and take photographs. Your success rate is going to be very, very low, and it's kind of why I do the other style of photography, because I used to come home quite dejected. I'd come home with sometimes nothing, 2 or 3 times in a row, and I want success. I want to have that great shot every time, or want to come back with something every time. So when I went to India, I set myself a target of getting three shots a day. Bear in mind, I was out for 10, 12 hours photographing. That's quite a low success rate. But even if you look at the great photographers, if you look at someone like Cartier-Bresson, he was photographing for probably 20 or 30 years, and yet he's probably only got a couple of dozen, and if probably a handful of great iconic pictures. And so none of us can expect to have a hit rate where we come back every weekend or every day with half a dozen amazing street photographs. It's not going to happen. It's the same as wedding photography. If you go for something like a fellowship, you're not going to get a fellowship picture at every wedding. You might get great pictures, but you're not going to get something that's outstanding or wow every time. That's going to build up probably one every 2 or 3 weddings that you can use in that type of portfolio. And I think it's the same with street. If if you come back and if you go to, let's say you go to the Notting Hill Carnival, if you come back with 5 great images, I think you should be really proud of yourself.
Brilliant, mate. I don't think we've actually answered this one, so it's a good question. Are you shooting manual focus or automatic focus?
I set my camera always autofocus, but everything else is manual. So manual, ISO, manual, exposure, speed, everything like that is manual.
Brilliant. The 35mm lens that you talked about earlier, do you have a preference, 1.4 or 1.8, or what you can afford?
Again, the 1.8 from Nikon is absolutely fine. I do have the 1.4, but I very rarely shoot at 1.4 on the street. I'm normally shooting at f3.2, f4, f5.6, that sort of thing, because it's about moments, and you can miss a great moment by having it out of focus. People look at the moment rather than look at that great bokeh or that how little depth of field is there. The other photographers might talk about that, but everyone else will just look at the image and say, wow, that's a great image, and if there's a bit more in focus, it doesn't matter as long as you've got that, if you like, decisive moment.
Brill, we've just got a couple of last questions there, Bud. I know we've talked about this quite early on, so maybe it was missed because it's come through a couple of times. You don't seem to have had any issues with taking people's pictures. Have you ever had a problem, and what's the best way to deal with it?
I've never had a problem. I've seen it occur, and I went on a workshop about 5 years ago, and one of the photographers shot in the style of, gosh, I'm trying to think, with a very well-known American photographer who shoots with a flash very close and points a flash in people's faces, that sort of thing. And his name's just gone from my mind at the moment. But someone objected to a photograph he took, and he basically faced it off with the woman and said, he said, you're out in the street. He said, if I want to take a picture of you, I'll take one. What are you going to do about it? Whereas I would have just said, I'm really sorry. I'm really, really sorry. Shall I delete it? And if she said, yeah, I'd say, yeah, okay. And if it was a great shot, I might not have deleted it, if I'm honest, but I would have gone through that process or motion. But if she really was, I'd just move on. I wouldn't have that confrontation with anyone. I'm not that sort of person. I don't like it. It scares me. I'd rather sort of just walk away. And I'm not looking for trouble at all. I'm looking to have an easy life and a nice life and engage with those people that are happy to have their photographs being taken.
Brill, just going back to the focusing, do you use zone focusing at all?
No, I don't. I know a lot of photographers do, and I know a lot of photographers who use it, with the smaller cameras, and they hold the camera down at their waist and they zone focus it. I've personally, and it's only my own view, and it's not necessarily the right or wrong view, I feel it's cheating a little bit. You are really taking a picture in a sneaky way, and are you doing that because you're afraid to put that camera up to your eye and take the picture and let them see you're taking it? And a lot of this holding it down low is because maybe you need to go and overcome your fear factor rather than, and you'll get a better image. I know in the old days, people like, Bresson, they used to zone focus, but their lenses were slow as hell, and they had slow speed and film, and they didn't have autofocus. But I'd rather compose the image properly, and I don't think you can if you're zone focusing it if you're holding the camera down low.
Brill, we are coming to an end, Mark, but I have a question for you, and as it's actually aimed at women photographers, you might not be best suited to answer it, but I'm going to ask it for you anyway. So do you have any advice for women street photographers? Are there any no-nos with examples to like countries, cultures and areas that that it might be frowned upon?
Yeah, I think it's a great question actually, and we've been asked it on the trip we're doing to India, because we've got a couple of ladies coming on that trip, and they've just said, what should we wear, or how do we sort of interact with people? And I think you've just got to look at where you're going, and respect their culture. And if you're going to, let's say you went to Israel and you want to do the Wailing Wall, or if you wanted to go to India, I would just cover up. I think if you're a girl and you wore a low cut top, and like if a guy, if I went out there, I mean, my son went out there and he's covered with tattoos, and he got off the train, and this big ring of people just surrounded him, and they were just looking at his tattoos like he was from another planet because they'd never seen anything like it. So from that point onwards, he just covered up. So I think it's a case of respecting, the culture, dressing appropriately, and being discreet, and I think if you're a woman, probably just wear some wear maybe a long flowing skirt or dress, almost like a summer dress, and something over your arms or whatever. But there's a lot of religions, particularly when you go to India, or if you probably went to trying to think where now, but if you went to Israel, where they object to bare skin being shown. So just cover up a little bit more. It's just respecting what they are as their religion or their culture, and generally you won't have a problem with it.
I think that brilliant, and I mean it's just homework, isn't it, Mark? You're going to travel somewhere and you are planning to take photographs. Then do a little bit of homework and understand people's cultures. It was interesting that you talked about Marrakesh during your conversation, and I meant to interject it then, but somebody actually put in the question panel that in some of their beliefs in Marrakesh, they feel that the image is stealing their soul, and that might be why you encountered the problem. I
mean, just to finish. I mean, last year when I went to India, one of the guys that come out with us, there was 8 of us, and someone said to him, "You can't go out on the streets looking like that." And he said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he had a khaki outfit on, head to toe, and he had the two D810s, Nikon D810s on. They clap to your belt like a gunslinger almost, with big long lenses on. He had dark shades on. And he almost looked like he was going out on a safari hunt. And you can't walk around really poor slums or poor streets of India looking like you're going hunting for a lion in Africa. So he was told, just dumb it all down. Just take one camera, get that sling off, and all the other stuff, and you don't need to look like that. And he bought it, he understood it, but he just hadn't thought about it. And I think it's doing your homework before is really, really important.
Mark, thank you so much for joining us again tonight. We've had loads of feedback thanking you for your time and sharing your images with us. We've had interest over for your day in London as well on the 23rd. So that's Mark's workshop there in front of you guys, 23rd of August, Speaker's Corner in London. So these are the images you're seeing, and hopefully be able to recreate those. We're fortunate enough to be allowed to tag along with him as well. So we'll be recording the day, and anybody on that course with Mark will be able to get a copy of that from ourselves as well. Good night, everybody. Good night, Mark. Thanks again. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Dave. Bye.